How's it going, guys? It's Cass. Hopefully your guys' league starts going well. Mine's been pretty good so far. I'm level 80 and I have 39 Atlas completion at the start of my day 2. So not too bad for a day 1. I thought I'd take the time to talk about some of the changes and the general progression that I've made to the build so far, so to hopefully help those that are starting to get to the point where I'm at. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is Tinker Skin. This is something that you should try to get as soon as you can as you get towards maps. So if you're like in Act 9 or Act 10 and you can get Tinker Skin, great. Just make sure that your res is set up to be able to run this. What Tinker Skin allows us to do is we can switch to Eldritch Battery pretty fast, and it also gives us access to a decent amount of recovery in the form of that 100 life recovered whenever a trap is triggered by an enemy. So it's fairly nice for the survivability portion, and it gives us access to EB. The reason why I want to go to EB fast is we can cap out a lot of our mana once we gain access to all of the mana reservation nodes. So you're going to want to make sure you have this cluster down here and this cluster up here, and on top of that you want to make sure that you have this mana reservation efficiency node. And once you have all 3 of those, you can go straight into the Endgame Auras, which I would suggest almost everyone do. The Endgame Auras that we're running are Determination, Grace, and Skitterbots. Then I threw in a Vitality because I had extra mana in the pool. Once you get to Determination and Grace together, your survivability is significantly better. Then on top of that, with the recovery of Tinker Skin, it's fairly comfortable, especially through the early progression, even with a low amount of life pool currently. Main thing is you want to make sure that you have your flasks set up. My flasks aren't that great right now, but I do have this one that gives me increased armor, which is pretty nice. As you can see, once my Molten Shell procs here in a second, I have a 1100 Molten Shell on top of the life pool that I have. Now let's talk about Molten Shell. Originally I was using Molten Shell with cast damage taken. I think that's still perfectly fine. The only issue with cast damage taken Molten Shell is it requires you to run a lower level Molten Shell in order for it to trigger consistently. With the new automation support, however, it gives us the ability to run a high level Molten Shell, and it makes it so it's always triggering off cooldown. So it's actually fairly nice to have. Basically you have 50% of the time you have Molten Shell just up, which has been super nice for mapping. Now I'm not 100% sure if it's better overall for survivability, as when you think about it with Molten Shell, cast damage taken Molten Shell allows it to be a buffer after you get hit, which is nice because those are the situations where you need it. Whereas this is just up 50% of the time, so 50% of the time you'll have it and 50% of the time you won't. So there's a world where it might just be better to run cast damage taken for the survivability aspect of it, but I'm gonna test it out and see. And honestly, I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially since we're playing softcore anyway, so if we die, we die. After we have all of that set up, the auras set up and everything, the next step with this build will be to go for the helmet. So right now Heat Shiver is pretty expensive, around 40C. So instead of doing a Heat Shiver, I was just doing Eye of Malice. It's 2C, it has the exact same res build up, so you don't have to worry about changing your res afterwards. And the only main thing to point out with this helmet is this line here. Nearby enemies have 50% increased fire and cold res. What this means is that it will increase enemies that have positive cold res and decrease further enemies that have negative cold res. So you want to make sure that you are always casting your curse on rares and on bosses, so we aren't giving them increased res when using this helmet. But I mean, realistically you should be doing that already, but just make sure that you do that. Another thing about the curses that I forgot is we don't get our second curse until we finish Uber Lab anyway. But in the POB, it says to have Assassin's Mark linked with Mark on Hit. Now, Mark on Hit only works with your shield charge, because Mark on Hit requires an attack to happen. So if you are using Mark on Hit, you have to shield charge an enemy, and then that'll apply the mark. Now, you only have to shield charge them one time for the mark to apply, because the marks don't expire, but it is slightly annoying. If you forget about that, you're going to lose like 20% damage because of it. If you wanted to instead, you can do Arcanist Brand with Assassin's Mark and with your Frostbite, and then you don't even have to worry about having shield charge, and that's what you're going to do if you're switching to the staff version of this build. Anyway, quick little editor's note here of something that I missed. make sure that you get this spell suppression mastery node as soon as you can. This gives you a chance to suppress spell damages lucky. What that means is it rolls the calculation twice. So it gives you like a pseudo 50% increased spell suppress chance once you have this cluster here and this cluster up here. It basically will feel like you have like 90-ish spell suppress chance, which is super nice and will make you feel way more tankier in maps. So make sure you're getting that pretty fast. Hopefully this video helped you guys, and if you have any other questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.